name is John Campo. I'm the principal natural resource planner for Marin County Parks. And Rob and I have been co-managing this project. What, Rob, it's been like 6 years, I think, or something. It's been going on some time.
Just about.
Yeah. And so we're going to actually co-present. Rob is going to take the first half. I'm going to take the second half. And so I'll turn it over to Rob.
Well, yeah, just thanks so much for inviting us to talk with you. And we've got a pretty small group, so maybe we can keep it kind of informal. But yeah, I'm Rob LaPorte. I work with the Golden Gate Parks Conservancy. It's the nonprofit partner to Marin County Parks, as well as all of the other one-time land management agencies in Marin. And so, yeah, just here to talk about our plans for restoration of Roy's Redwoods. And just starting right off with this picture, love it just because it's showing our next generation and kind of puts what we're doing in context to preserve these open spaces for the future. I'm sure you all know where Roy's Redwoods is, but just in case, it's the open space preserve, kind of bounded by Nicasio Valley Road and Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. And when we talk about restoring Roy's Redwoods, we are really focused kind of on the area where there's an informal trailhead along Nicasio and the meadow trail and just the alluvial valley where the old growth redwood forest is really concentrated. And just a nod to our entire team here, along with Marin County Parks and the Parks Conservancy, we have been developing this entire project with Marin Water, the National Park Service, and California State Parks. We've been able to tap into a lot of their expertise to think about this project as a priority for managing all of our natural resources around Marin County, kind of across jurisdictional boundaries, and just kind of as a cohesive unit. And we've also been fortunate to be able to bring on some excellent consultants with Restoration Design Group, who has been kind of leading the public access elements of this project, along with Rolf Lamont as their partner, and then Prunensky Chatham, who has been helping out with more of the hydrological restoration elements of the project. So just a quick background, through OneTAM, all of those different agencies have set up a prioritization list for projects throughout the Mount Tam area. And Roy's Redwoods was kind of added to the list of 12 projects that we really wanted to focus our collective efforts on back in like 2016. And from there, we moved into just working with all those agencies to kind of figure out what restoration of Roy's Redwoods might be. And so we were scoping out the project and embarked on a community-based site analysis for a couple of years. And that kind of led into some special studies that we conducted. And really the past few years, we've developed conceptual designs and have been working on refining that design. And we're in a position to get into CEQA and our environmental compliance starting this summer. So yeah, I'm just going to talk through the site analysis phase before I pass it back to John. And I just wanted to say that, this part of the project was really important just to introduce our whole team to Roy's Redwoods and make sure that we were understanding it, doing our due diligence on collecting the best available science on the site and working with the community just to build a holistic project. So one thing we did was we just did a literature review of just looking back at any historical imagery we could come across, lots of technical studies that we're looking at, sediment loads in the Lagunitas Creek watershed, trying to understand just some of the environmental issues that had already been documented, not only at Roy's Redwoods, but just in the surrounding landscape and watershed. And even just trying to just uncover articles that have been written in the past, anything that referenced Roy's Redwoods. So pictured here is an article from 1984 when apparently that large tree in the middle of the valley fell down. And I believe it's the same one that's pictured in the opening slide as well. So just trying to understand the local character of the site and all of the technical details. We were also fortunate to be able to work with all of the partner agencies to do several bio blitzes where we just invited community members to come out and document, the flora, the fauna, and the fungus that are at Roy's Redwoods, just to build up our species inventory understanding of the site. We also did several cameras out at Roy's Redwoods and Maurice Thorner Preserve. There's about 18 cameras that were just documenting kind of larger and small mammal species that are kind of hard to document on a day-to-day basis with camera traps at night and throughout the day. And we also partnered with USGS to do bat surveys, actually like catching bats. And we found that there's actually like 7 different species of bats that utilize Roy's Redwoods. So really just trying to build up that kind of science-based documentation of the site. And that coupled with, over 20 years of research documenting the presence and absence of northern spotted owls that use Roy's Redwoods, and how often they're successfully nesting there. And, it's really important habitat for these owls. And working with, a lot of our experts on, different like biological resources, we identified a need to just get a better understanding of the meadow in Roy's Redwoods. We know that it had been used in the past for community events, and there was a long history of mowing the meadow. And we ended up just hiring a botanist to just do a study of the meadow's current conditions, just to understand, what species composition is there, and try to answer the question of, should we invest our time and energy in restoring the meadow? And if so, what would that might look like? And kind of what we found through that assessment was really the meadow is predominantly invasive species, and on the perimeters of the meadow, there are actually kind of rare, more wetland associated species that are really important for the health of the forest. So without getting too into depth, I think it shifted our focus from trying to restore the meadow to maybe trying to figure out how to enhance the wetland species that are on the periphery of the meadow. And another big hole in our knowledge was having a really complete understanding of what was going on through the smaller watershed at Roy's Redwoods. There's been a lot of documentation of what's going on with Lagunitas Creek, and especially as it relates to salmon. But we didn't know a ton of detail about some of the issues in the alluvial valley of Roy's Redwoods. And with Penobscot Chatham, we were able to see that there's areas with really, really compacted soils. There's some channelization, but we also understood that maybe there's not a ton of like sediment issues. And we also know that it's not salmon habitat right in Larson Creek at Roy's Redwoods proper. So just doing this hydrologic assessment kind of helped us target some of the opportunities and constraints for improving the Larson Creek in that valley. And this is just a photo illustrating, you know, the conditions there about 4 years ago. And as you can see, the creek bank is incised. There's very little vegetation surrounding the creek, and overall it's just it's kind of in poor condition in several areas throughout the grove. And another really important part of our analysis was just, you know, seeing those denuded vegetation areas, seeing those compacted soils, and then just observing that there's a lot of just social trail use throughout the valley there. And so we actually mapped every single visible social trail throughout the valley area. And as you can see, it's just kind of a spider web of trails that are tending to go a bit towards places of interest, particularly like big kind of charismatic trees. But it's a small area, and you know, there's over 2.5 miles of trail in an area that's, you know, just a couple acres big. And so in addition to mapping the trails on the ground, we were just very curious and wanted to know, you know, what was the draw to Roy's Redwoods? Why were people coming there, and where were they going? And, you know, what areas were of particular interest? And by and large, folks are really just there for the trees. You know, hiking is important, but really people just wanted that experience of the redwood trees, and we're presuming that's the old growth nature of those trees. And over the course of the year, throughout all types of different conditions, rainy, sunny days, weekdays, evenings, mornings, we were just able to document kind of where people were predominantly visiting, and just got a good snapshot of people's priorities in the preserve through in-person interviews. You know, and just part of seeing the site and getting a feel for how people move through Roy's Redwoods, it was very clear that there's a kind of a playful nature at Roy's Redwoods, particularly like with this, you know, down tree that's kind of used as a hiking trail. And it seemed really important to us, and through talking to lots of folks, that was a really important characteristic to kind of maintain this playfulness of the forest. And at the same time, you know, it's an awe-inspiring place. The trees are amazing there, and just really wanting to maintain a really just immersive experience of the forest that you can kind of stumble on is important. And, you know, taking all of our own research and analysis, we tried our best to meet with you all, and through public meetings or just site visits or field days or talks with Gene, just make sure that we were understanding you know, the site correctly, and how people use it and what we value collectively at Roy's. And beyond the public meetings and just the events, you know, we also met with outdoor environmental educators, and trying to understand, you know, the use of Roy's as an outdoor classroom, and just a place for early childhood development, and just building that next generation of stewards. And finally, yeah, just this was a picture from our field day event when, you know, we had done all this gathering of knowledge, and this was just a nice opportunity to meet out there and kind of report back on what we had learned from you all, and just from some of the science-based research. And I'm going to pass it off to John at this point. to just talk about how all that site analysis work really led into our goals for the project, and then we were able to shape kind of the restoration from there.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up where Rob left off. And so Rob talked about the community process and the site analysis, and that led to these 4 goals. And so I'm just going to walk through these 4 goals and kind of describe some of the components of the project. So restore and enhance the hydrologic process and function. And so Rob mentioned the incised channel, and I'm sure many of you folks have been out there in the winter months. You've seen water move through there pretty quickly. And really what we're looking for is kind of a more slow it, spread it, sink it. We'd like the water to settle in, nourish the roots of the redwood trees, kind of create a spongy redwood forest floor, more of a natural system, connecting the channel to the floodplain, because currently right now the channel and the floodplain are somewhat disconnected. And so this image I found, it's a little blurry on my screen. Hopefully you can see it. It's actually, it's a great image, although in this image they're talking about beavers. We're not talking about introducing beavers to Roy's Redwoods. I know that is being talked about in places, but the image still works. And instead of beavers, we would build log weirs, we would build pooling logs, and we would slow it and spread it and sink it. And you see here, like this is kind of the existing condition of Roy's, and the water table's low. And as the beavers in this photo are building log weirs and dams, the water starts to slow down, spread it, sink it, it settles into the water, and the water table rises. So this is something that I think it's a good representation of what we're trying to do with the hydrology. And this is actually some of the construction drawings. And so here you see these are pooling logs here to kind of slow water down, spread it out. This kind of orange section outlined in red, this is the main channel. And so in this section of the channel, we're actually talking about importing appropriate soils and gravels and infilling the channel. Now this approach is not, it's not a standard practice. It's kind of a new practice, and it's called trying to get the stream back to a stage 0 restoration approach. And so we would import fill, and we would use log weirs, and again, trying to grade the stream, slow the water down, spread it out. And we've had the regulatory agencies come out and talk about this. They're super excited about it because it would really represent the first stage 0 restoration effort in Marin County. This is just another kind of graphic representation of what log weirs might look like with infilling on the upside of the creek. So restoring and enhancing the health of the redwood forest is another important goal. And so again, as Rob was talking, the Roy's had unmanaged or unregulated public access. To be fair, I work for Marin County Parks, and we never really created a legible public access plan. And because the trees are such a draw, people have just kind of gone anywhere and everywhere, and that's really compacted the soils, and it's kind of accelerated water as it flows through this system. And so again, we kind of want more of a spongy forest floor with a rich understory and biodiversity. So this is kind of what we're shooting for, more of a legible trail and changing the culture for folks to stay on trails to help preserve the resilience of these redwood trees. And so Rob showed you this image, and again, just to illustrate all the social trails, and these orange areas we identified as highly compacted areas. And so this is our proposed trail network. And I know this is a lot to look at right here, but I'll try and explain it a little bit. This green section here, this would be part of the inclusive access plan, and I'm going to talk about that more in a minute, as is the purple. So these two sections, the purple and the green, would be inclusive access plan. And then the beige color would be more of a secondary or primitive trail system. You know, this forest trail here on the edge, this would be generally very flat and accessible for most people. It just wouldn't meet the high standard of the inclusive access plan. And so in addition to creating that legible trail system, we would also work to propagate native plants. And we have a native plant in our nursery at Marin County Parks, and we would partner with other native plant nurseries to grow the plants we need to revegetate the forest floor. And so again, some of those things that we would look at are decompacting soils. And I think the tool that we're considering for this is an air spade to really break up those compacted soils. I talked to Mia Monroe, if any of you folks know her from Muir Woods, and she told me when, because Muir Woods at one point had a very degraded appearance as Roy's does today. And when they went to this more legible trail system at Muir Woods, they had to decompact soils. In some of the trails, they didn't decompact well enough. And it's been a struggle for native plants to colonize those areas. So we really want to do a good job in decompacting the soils. We want to decommission the social trails and implement very clear wayfinding signage to orient visitors and really encourage them to stay on trails and explain why it's important to stay on trails. And then implement a forest understory revegetation plan. So we're developing a suite of native plants that we would propagate and then revegetate the understory. And finally, we'll develop a stewardship program. And you'll see on my last slide, the stewardship program is open-ended. We don't have a start-stop date. We imagine that once we get the stewardship program going, it will always be there. This is just another diagram showing some of the revegetation of the understory. So the different color polygons represent different plant communities, whether it's kind of more of a wetland species, redwood understory, and trying to, for us to narrow down about how many plants we're going to need to revegetate the site. And so we're going to look to develop an access and discovery trail. And so back in 2016, the Board of Supervisors adopted Marin County Parks Inclusive Access Plan. And really what that looked to do was to improve accessibility of open space trails and establish design guidelines in terms of what an accessible trail is. And so some of the characteristics might be, the grade, how steep is it, the cross slope, whether it's, tilted on its side, how wide is it? Is it 1 foot wide? Is it 5 feet wide? Does it have stairs or ramps? And so it's not the same standards as ADA, excuse me, on the paved environment, but it's really designed for earthen trails. And so Roy's was identified as one of the initial open space trails to be considered for a fully compliant access and discovery trail. Excuse me. Just getting over my first cold in 3 years. So this is this photograph is an example of what that access and discovery trail might look like. It would be, minimum 5 feet wide, fairly smooth and flat, and it would be accessible for somebody in a wheelchair, but it would also be just enjoyable for anybody, whether you're, if you have a baby with a stroller, or you walk with a cane, or you're just somebody that wants to go for a stroll. So again, this wouldn't be the entire trail system, it would be a portion of it. And so that portion, which would be access and discovery trail, would be this green section and the purple section. And the distinction between the green and the purple is the green is the existing Roy's Loop Trail. So that would include equestrians as well as hikers. And the purple section would just be for hikers. But they would both be for inclusive access, or this access, they would be fully compliant with the inclusive access plan. And again, the beige section here, this is hiking only. So this is not suitable for equestrians, and it wouldn't be fully compliant with the IAP, but it would be, I think, very comfortable trail system. This section right in here, we're calling the scramble. This would be maybe a little more playful, and this big down tree would be a little more playful than the rest of it. And I'll show you that in a minute. This is a watercolor image of what the boardwalk loop trail might look like. There's definite need for a boardwalk through the floodplain. We looked at 3 spots that we're going to cross the floodplain, because we want to create a trail system that continues to take folks where they want to go and continue to create an immersive experience. We wanted to provide access to the floodplain. We needed to. If we didn't, we really wouldn't get compliance. And so this is a close-up of the entranceway. I'll just point out a couple of the features here. So just to orient folks, this is Nicasio Valley Road right here. This is the existing ramp down to Roy's. And so we would move the porta toilet to this location right here. So right now that's currently somewhere down in here in the floodplain. And so we want to get that toilet out of the floodplain. That seems like a no-brainer. We don't want a porta toilet in the floodplain. And then this would provide a little more accessibility for folks as well. This would all be a very gradual ramp, which would be meeting the inclusive access plan guidelines, as with this. This staircase right here, this is where people are shortcutting across from the road, just going straight down. It just seems like, well, people want to get down that way, so we'll provide a stairway. That would not be compliant with inclusive access, but it would be a comfortable set of stairs. There would be 1 parking spot right here. This would be transformed into an ADA spot. This is really the only change to the parking arrangement that currently exists. So we're not really adding a space as much as just creating 1 ADA space out of the existing parking spaces. And then that person, whether they're in a wheelchair or a walker or whatnot, they could access this ramp, and then either direction would meet that inclusive access guidelines. So here's a side-by-side of the existing kind of stairway I was just mentioning, and here's the watercolor that shows that access point. And this side, this would all be meeting the inclusive access plan guidelines. Here's the existing portable toilet here, and it's a watercolor of what that might look like on the inclusive access ramp. And then our final goal was to continue to maintain an immersive experience of the Redwoods that's consistent and works with the restoration goals. And I think Rob touched on the visitor use survey that we completed. This really gave us an indication of what are the places people want to get to. We want our trail system to continue to bring folks to those places. So whether they're giant down logs or big standing trees or burned interior of redwood trees was an attraction. And there's a couple of little tree caves out there that kids like to go to. We want to make sure the trail system still gets people to those places. So this tree, if you're familiar with Roy's, this is a common kind of walking place where people come up this ramp and they walk across that tree. Well, we wanted to build that into the plan. So you see this is that tree right here. And so here's the ramp. It actually comes, in the plan, it comes off the boardwalk and you get on that ramp and you go across the log. So the boardwalk would be somewhere in the bottom of the screen. And this would be improved, but it would largely stay the same. So we would continue to have that playful element to the trail system. And then when you get over to this area, this is what we're calling the scramble. And so this is going to be a little more dynamic. This is actually part of the floodplain, and so that's going to change over time. And so we wanted to consider a trail system that would be dynamic with it. So these, we haven't fully figured out exactly how we're going to do this. I think a lot of it's going to be field fit. But we want something that would, again, be consistent with the restoration. So these logs would actually serve as part of that pooling log to slow water down, to spread it out. And then the planks could be modular. So, you know, as this changes over time, maybe 10 years from now, the system might look and flow a little differently. So we might be adaptive with how the trail goes through the scramble. This is the nature exploration area. And again, as Rob was mentioning, we really heard from the community that outdoor education is a very important component to Roy's, and we didn't want to lose that. And so this tree right here with my two daughters sitting on it is kind of frames our nature outdoor exploration area. And so this would be an area for classes to meet, for gatherings to happen, if kids want to build forts, play with different wooden structures, this would be the place to do it. We would encourage it here when we would discourage it elsewhere. Currently, there's a lot of fort building in Roy's, and really it's kind of spread throughout the valley floor, and we'd really like to contain it to one area and sanction it there. And then finally, Rob and I have been working on this for some time, and as we hear about redwood trees that need to get cut down for a PG&E project or a flood control project, we make calls and we're trying to get them and stage them and save them. So right now we've got a pretty good pile of salvaged redwood stems that we can use for some of these structures, mill into wood for bridging or fencing. And so we're excited to have time to think and have work with partners that can stage some of these materials. So that's really exciting. And so finally, our next steps. The identified funding category has been ongoing. And so currently to date, we have 1.5 million committed through monies we've spent, through grants committed. We just submitted for a 1.5 million grant to the state parks program. We're hoping to hear back about that soon. And then we still need an additional $1 million specifically for some of the restoration components. And as Rob mentioned, we're looking to put our environmental review document out for public review later this summer. And then hoping that the public approves of our project, we would work with the regulatory agencies to develop a permitting plan. If the project is approved, we would begin project implementation summer of 2023, really more late summer, fall, and it really has to work with the nesting season of the spotted owls. So we would wait for that season to end before we went in there to begin the restoration. And then finally, the stewardship, like I said, would just be open-ended. It would be something we would begin and just maintain in perpetuity and develop a active community involvement. And I think that's it for my slides. Thank you.